I have a couple things I want to just run. I want to kind of just say these things before we start. So first of all, for those of us in the greater Seattle area, either earlier this week or last week, our legislature passed for the first time ever in the People's Republic of Washington, rent control. And it was gladly and ceremoniously signed by the human being they call our governor. That's all I'll say about him. So what do you guys think about that? You got any comment on that? Chris, I'll start with you from Washington.
Well, is my mic on?
It is.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I read the news. I haven't done a lot of follow-up on it yet, looking in the investment groups that I'm in. I'm sure there's a lot of hand-wringing and upset.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, like all things, I've been in real estate, for like 9 years now, and we've had some major changes over that time. And there's always a lot of hand-wringing and upset and this kind of thing, and then it becomes maybe much ado about nothing. I don't know. I guess I don't get as worked up as I used to. We'll see how it plays out.
That's what happens in your 50s. You're not as much of a revolutionary as you were in your 20s. Jonathan, you're in Seattle, right?
I'm in Los Angeles.
Oh, well, you have rent control there, too.
I'm in the rent control capital of the world.
Well, that or New York, yeah.
Yeah, and I will say, considering how much more expensive everything is here in Los Angeles than in the rest of the country, except for San Francisco and maybe Manhattan, my gasoline prices are now on average $4.79 to $5.79 a gallon, and they claim they're going to go up to about $8 a gallon. I just moved into an apartment because we're selling our house, and my rent is probably 2 times average the rest of the country for a comparable place. So having rent control, meaning they can only bump me up, a certain percentage every year when you live in a very, very expensive place and you're living paycheck to paycheck. As a consumer, this is, your largest expense, and it is massively stressful. And I know that being a landlord, it must be, annoying to not be able to control your prices, but at the same time, once you agree on a price, and you don't want it to go up immensely every year, especially when your wages aren't. So I'm for it, as
That's
long
fair.
as
Yeah.
it's reasonable.
Since I brought this up, I'll just say a couple things. I'll try to be Switzerland. I think that Chris, both you and Jonathan, you make good points. I mean, it really just depends on. It's like, are you a buyer or a seller? Are you a tenant or your landlord? I mean, this is not super complicated, right? I think the interesting thing is what level of government intervention is appropriate, because that's what this is. It's government intervention. And I love California. I've been there just a trillion times. And as you well know, Jonathan, if you've been you own a house there, Prop 13. You guys have enjoyed property tax caps for many years, like since the 70s. What was somewhat ironic about the Washington thing, and in my view as a voter, a resident, and a reader, entirely ceremonial, is that the next article was how rents have gone down. So, here the government's trying to wave the flag and go, oh, we got your back, but look at what the free market is doing. Because right now in the greater Puget Sound area where I am, there's just a ton of apartments coming online. There's just big incentives. And that's just the nature of a market, no matter what your zip code is. Okay, I got a couple other goodies for you we'll chime in on later. But I thought we'd do today is to do a basic review of estate planning. And this is a talk that I give the morning, typically, of Does It Pencil Course 2. And I give this talk under the banner of what I call adulting. All right. So just a couple of kind of general comments before I get into the more specific things. Okay. And Roger, I know you don't do estate planning, but if you would make notes, and if I'm doing things wrong or you have something to add as our attorney of record here, I would appreciate that. And if not, that's cool. But, you are a lawyer. So, all right. So the first thing is, and this is very important, is that the United States is a federalist republic. And what that means is states are sovereign. And the state that you live in and the state that you die in and the state where you have your documents drafted matters. So if you are in an interstate world, consult your proper advisors, okay? Because it does make a difference, all right? The second thing I'll say is that these are legal documents, and as with all legal documents, you should have a lawyer look at them before you sign them, before your clients sign them. And over the years I've given this talk, I get the question all the time, should I use LegalZoom? Okay, or one of these online, lawyer in a box kind of deals. And, people want to save money, and that's completely understandable. So my best counsel on that is if you want to go that way, get everything done, and then throw down a few $100 more to have a licensed attorney in the state where you live review documents to make sure they conform. Okay? And I'm going to talk today on a very basic level. This stuff can get super complex and super expensive. And I'm not qualified. Well, I'm kind of qualified. I've done a lot of research about this stuff. But I'm not going to have that talk today. I'm going to keep this pretty much on the basic level. Okay? But those two things I think are really important. These are important documents, states rule. And my third sort of opening comment is this, and this is especially true if you have a family, okay? And I've been through this both in my personal life twice, with both my parents having died a long time ago, and I have been a consultant for trustees on fairly large estates. And I'm just going to say this, I say it all the time. When someone dies, money changes people. Okay? You don't want to believe it. Oh, no, not my kids. Oh, no, not my family. Yes, your kids, and yes, your family. Now, I hope that's not the case. But there's a certain amount of defense that goes on when you do this, okay? Now, I'm going to talk to you guys directly. And again, as always, pen and paper. But when you are the person doing your stuff, you're what's known in the law. It's called the testator, okay? I'm going to use some legal terms today. The testator. This is your testament, okay? And I've told countless testators, you want your kids to do the right thing, and if you have a certain amount of money, you want to try to prevent a fight if you can, okay? I mean, we live in America. America's the doctrine of fairness, blah, blah, blah. But just kind of keep that in the back of your mind if you're doing this for yourself or if you're working with a client and having the discussion. Okay, so that's kind of my opening salvo. Okay, I'm going to cover 4 different documents here. I think 3 of them are a minimum. The 4th is optional. And the first thing that you need to have is a last will and testament. Okay? You need to have this. Everybody needs to have this. Because if you don't have this, then you will pass what's called intestate, because you're the testator. And when you pass intestate, basically a judge who you've never met decides how to divvy up your stuff. If that's what you want, then don't get a will. But if you'd rather have some control over things that happen and so on and so forth, get a will, okay? That's document number 1. Now, again, this is a state thing. I'll give you a couple examples. In Idaho, where Jacques is, at least I know an Idaho attorney pretty well, you can actually handwrite your own will and it's valid. You can't do that in Washington. In fact, in Washington, I mean, you could handwrite it, I guess, but you have to have 2 witnesses attest you signing your will at the time of it being signed. Now, I don't know about other states. I can only speak to Washington, but that's been a Washington rule for as long as I can remember. Okay? And it needs to be notarized as well. Okay? So making sure that your documents are conforming to the law is really important. I'm going to go back to my opening statement here. One of the things you're trying to do as the testator is, yes, prevent fights with your kids, that sort of stuff. But here's the other thing. You want to try to put up a firewall against what I would call invaders of your estate. And I'll give you an example. So my mother died about 30 years ago, and my father died 37 years ago. And not because it was his birthday yesterday. But anyway, my mom, and I'm just going to be super honest with you guys. You know, this is like the story that I actually lived. My mother was a chronic alcoholic. And when you're a chronic alcoholic, and I mean the first thing she did every morning was take a drink, that kind of drunk, you don't necessarily make the best decisions, if you get my drift. And so she married a guy about a year after my dad died, who I'm pretty sure is going to burn in hell for eternity. That's another story. But anyway, when they got divorced, he showed up. So I'll tell you the story real quick. So my mother died of liver cancer, and she was in hospice for about 6 or 7 weeks. And she passed, and my sister and I were doing 1 week on, 1 week off because she was in Palm Springs. And so she passed. I flew down the next day, and I got there at like, I don't know, in the evening. The next not my parents, my mother and her husband had split up because they had filed for divorce. She was living in the house. He was living in the condo that they owned down there. So they had 2 pieces of property. And like 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock the next morning, the doorbell rings the day after she died. And it's him. I can still see him. He's wearing his little chapeau and his tweed coat, and he has his little briefcase. And the first thing he says to me is, "You and your sister need to be gone, by 3 o'clock today." I said, "What?" I mean, my mom's, her stuff is all over the house. Like, we're not going anywhere. We got to get her stuff at a minimum. And who the hell are you to tell me what to do? Second thing he does is he says, "And I get everything." And he opens his little briefcase and he pulls out what he said was her will. I swear to God, this is true. I'm not kidding. Remember those tractor printers in the 80s, the ones that printed with the dot wheel? Remember those? Okay. He pulls out, he goes, "This is her will." It's still got the little tractor feed thing on it. I'm like, dude, not signed. And I said, "Well, so what's this?" "Oh, it's her will. I get everything." I said, "It's not her will." "Oh, yeah, it is." "Well, it's not signed." "Oh, my lawyer has a signed copy of his office in Tacoma." I'm like, "Sure he does." What he did not know was about 3 months previously, I had contacted my mother's divorce attorney and said, "Hey, my mom needs to, deal with her stuff because she's a chronic alcoholic and dying of cancer." So my mom's attorney was awesome. And so we put together her whole estate package. So what this guy didn't know was that we'd already put, the moat, the bridge, the turrets, the condom, everything around her stuff. He wasn't getting anything. All right. So it was just he's just a total fraud. But that's one of the reasons, it's one of my stories about why this kind of thing is so important and why documents need to be conforming. Okay. Because if they hadn't have been, and my mom didn't have that much, she had a little bit, but that's just how this guy was, and big surprise, my mother was his 6th wife. And then he got married one more time before he died. Anyway. Okay. So if you don't have one, get one. And my counsel to you with all of your clients, especially your clients with minor children, and I don't care if you're selling their house or their $20 million portfolio, you ask them, do you have a will? Do you have an estate plan? And I'm going to just kind of guess here, probably half of them don't. I have gotten in the grill of more than one 40-something with, tween or teenage kids. I'm like, are you kidding me? What is your, you take my hand. We're going right now. I feel that passionate about it because I'm more of a free marketeer. And I think that people, if you have stuff and you have kids, you know, you have the ability to make these decisions. But in American society, this is how you do them should you meet an untimely demise. All right. Okay. That's document number 1. Document number 2, 2 words, living trust. And this is optional. Okay. Not mandatory, optional. Here's most of the reason that people use a living trust: to avoid probate. So what is probate? Okay, let me take like a whole semester of law school and put it into a paragraph. Probate is a public court proceeding where a judge approves, it's called the personal representative of the estate, executor, executrix, and just some other judge stuff that they do. And it's a notice to creditors of all debts, and whoever the personal representative is has to provide the court with a list of all your stuff. Okay? All your real estate, all your stock accounts, all your debts, everything. And people don't want that stuff out in public. So the biggest reason that people that I found use living trusts is to avoid probate. There is no tax benefit to a living trust. Okay? So what happens is you set up this trust, okay? And it's just a shell. We call it a corpus. And then what you do is you put all your stuff inside the trust. Well, most of it. Car titles, you know, house title is optional. I'll talk about that maybe later. Stock accounts, retirement accounts, anything of significance that, you know, is legal, worth something, and has a title in it, you put it inside the trust, okay? So what happens is the trust owns the stuff. You don't own the stuff anymore. The trust owns the stuff, okay? And then here's the key feature. Trusts have 2 types of humans that interact with them: a trustee and a beneficiary, okay? The trustee is the one who controls the trust, okay? Has I'll just say broad and sweeping powers, to use, again, summarizing 3 pages of legal shit into a couple words. Broad and sweeping powers to pretty much do anything. But in a living trust, you can be both the trustee and the beneficiary. Okay? And that's how, in my experience, most people do it. So you just basically carry on with your life. You know, there's no big change, no tax consequences. All right? It's totally legit if you do it the right way. Again, have a competent attorney in your jurisdiction review. And then you go about your merry way. Okay? And then one day, boop, you know, you're horizontal. Okay. Your trust provides for 2 types of folks. Okay? Remember I said there's a trustee and a beneficiary? Then you have what are called successor trustees or trustee. Usually you name one, like if you're married, it'd be your spouse, hopefully. And then if that person, if you guys both like die in a crash on the way to Hawaii or whatever you do, then you have a couple successor trustees. You plan for that. That's how an attorney can help you. And then beneficiaries can, well, they change because you're no longer a beneficiary, but you just kind of lay out the map. Okay? And you have provisions for children and, you know, all the things that you do. But again, the key feature of a living trust is you avoid probate. Okay? And I think there's another pretty damn good reason to at least examine using living trust, and that is it forces you to sit down and really think about where I want my stuff to go. I mean, you can do that in a will, but I just think it's a little more of a thoughtful conversation when you use a trust document, and that's a debatable point, okay? Although it does apply to wills as well. But this whole exercise, again, under the banner of what I call adulting, you got to sit down and think, okay, where do I want my stuff to go? Okay, that's what you're doing. That's your homework on this one, okay? All right. Document number 3, a health care directive. And this is also known in the medical business as a DNR, do not resuscitate. Okay? So if you ever, well, You wouldn't know it if you found yourself in this situation. So let me rephrase that. If you find yourself in a situation where a loved one is in the hospital and, on the verge of the next thing, what this letter does, again, you are the testator, you are giving your instructions essentially about three things: hydration, nutrition, and what's known as heroic measures. Okay? Now, I'm going to ask a very simple question. Just, if you agree, just raise your hand. It seems like a weird question, but I've actually lived through this. I'll give you a story in just a second. If something happened to you and you were brain dead, okay, and I don't want to explain brain dead. It's kind of gross, you get it. Would you want your body to stay alive, or would you rather they pull the plug on you, so to speak? Raise your hand if you're a plug puller. Yeah, okay, most people are. Okay, not everybody, and that's fine. So that's what this leather does. Okay, so another quick story. This was like 16-ish years ago. Get a call one day. I was living in Hood River with my wife. I was married then. And it was from a hospital, and found out that her little brother had OD'd on Oxy, and he was in a coma. The problem was, from the time they called the paramedics till they got there was about 20 minutes. And when I do the math, he'd basically been dead for, 20 minutes kind of thing. And he was not in good health. He was a young guy, but cerebral palsy, and dude had a tough life. It was tough. So they took him up to Swedish Hospital, which, if you're from the Seattle area, it's probably the best brand in hospitals and medical care. And we drove up to, we're about 4 or 5 hours away. We get there, and he's laying there, and he's in a coma that they had put him in. So the hospital put him in a coma, and he was on a breathing machine. And he stayed there for the next 7 days, because we had to go through all the bullshit and all the drama and all the tears. And boy, do I got some stories about that I won't get into today. It was ugly. And this guy it was just simple. He didn't have anything. But the whole idea of these people that you leave behind having to make a decision to end your life is not an easy decision for people to make, even if you know it's the right thing to do. All the neurologists and the whole deal, and when he passed away, he had MRSA in the hospital. And you have to wear these plastic gowns and all this stuff. And the whole family's just falling apart. And I decided to pull the plug. And I told his mother, I said, I'll go with you. Nobody else would. So I walked in there. I sat next to her, held her hand on the bed. She held his hand. The nurse came in, unplugged him. 5 minutes later, that little EKG thing flatlined. She took her stethoscope and pronounced him dead. Okay. What I believe, and you can believe what you want to believe, but what I believe was, God's plan. It was his time. That's what I believe. But here's what I learned. Could have avoided so much agony, emotional stuff, all of it, had he had a DNR. Okay? Now, I know I'm just kind of like saying this to you. The difference between you and me, maybe, I don't know your personal lives, but I've experienced it. I've lived through it. And believe you me, when that guy woke up on a Wednesday morning, he didn't have on his to-do list, I'm going to OD today. And this is like the last day I'll be alive. That was not his plan, I'll guarantee you that. Nor is it of kind of anybody. Car wreck, whatever happens, right? So, again, I fly this stuff under the flag of what I call adulting, things that people don't want to think about. But if you are someone who has other people in your life, you better think about this, and better yet, do something about it.